make sure that you're taking care of your mind before you're taking care of your money.
And I am extremely excited and grateful that you're on and you took time out. And this will be a perfect time for you to do a mini introduction of who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is SANYAL. I am a entrepreneur that lives at the intersection of business and culture. So both those things in my life have been really influential. Always been a creative person, but always felt like creative people were told that they can't make money. And that always bothered me. And so I've dedicated my life to creating businesses and creating things that live at that intersection. A marketing agency, a cafe restaurant, after the beloved drink of chai, artist management, real estate investment fund, and entrepreneurs workshop that caters to minority creators and entrepreneurs. And so everything I do is kind of focused around that. I am the eldest child of two immigrants from Kolkata, India. Grew up the classic first generation American experience, but I had a lot of defining moments in my life that turned the American dream into a potential American nightmare. And so to kind of make it out of that and be here today is something that I hold very close to me.
Dude, that's such a long, amazing resume of things that you do and that you've accomplished and that you're working toward. Speaking of your parents, was being a doctor or a lawyer or engineer ever part of your journey growing up, or was this something that they ever like pressured you or pushed you to do?
Yeah, I mean, before, this entire episode today, I want to give context. Like, my parents are incredible, in the sense of like, they've always trusted me to do the things that I was going to do anyway. But like, my parents have never been those type of parents. Like, they're very like flexible and generous and thoughtful in terms of like what they want for their children. That being said, I've been fighting the power for, a solid 20 something years, in the sense of like, I've always been pushing back. Um, my parents definitely did, and probably still to this day secretly, want, a more professional career choice for myself and my brother. I went to school for economics and finance, and I actually worked at a hedge fund for a couple of years and did a lot of like things in the Wall Street world. And I honestly thought that that was going to be my career path for a bit, until I realized that that wasn't who I was. So if they had to pick something, yeah, my parents probably thought I'd be a banker or,
Yeah,
some type of finance guy.
that's really sweet that your parents had that level of trust. I think that's a really actually incredibly difficult thing to do, to like completely kind of like trust your kid and let go of that control and try to let them grow and do what they they think they want to do,
Right.
and hope that they're on the right path. So that's actually really sweet that they went down that way. When you were younger, did you have something that you wanted to be, or that was there something that you used to dream that, yo, I want to be this, or I want to do this?
Yeah, so being the eldest, and my parents, kind of fresh off the boat, moved here, and they're still figuring things out. We don't really understand that. Like, our parents were figuring it out as they were going on, as we were growing up, right? And you kind of only learn
100%.
that in hindsight. Um, to give you context, like, I was like skateboarding when I was like 8 years old, and my parents were like, "What are you doing?" Like, that's like, I started there, right? So the
Yeah.
bar was all messed up from the beginning. If I wanted to be anything when I grew up, I mean, I think the closest thing I can think about is like, I was obsessed with, and still am, with hip hop music, and I wanted to be an artist, and I got to live that dream for a long time. But that thing that I wanted to do in my teenage years, like, I wanted to rap, man. I wanted the world to acknowledge me as a musician, as an artist, and some type of business person. I didn't know what that looked like at that time.
Dude, that's amazing. One, I had no idea you skateboarded. And then second, I know that you're involved in the music industry, but I didn't know you wanted to, you wanted to rap. I wonder if there's any tracks somewhere that you've recorded that have they been released?
Oh man, listen, like, first of all, skateboarding, my AIM screen name was Ani SK8 BRDR. Like, I was lit. I love skateboarding, man. Skateboarding was like, it was such a exercise in freedom, you know,
Yeah.
and that taught me so much about the things that I do to this day. As crazy as that sounds, like skateboarding culture was on the forefront of sneaker culture, of breaking down a lot of like racial stereotypes in terms of like, you know, the kids that came together to celebrate that sport, streetwear, you know, Supreme fashion, like all of that came from skateboarding. I had a Supreme hat when I was like 16 because like you just buy them at the skate shop,
Yeah.
you know. And to the music point, uh I was I dedicated like 10 years of my life to being an artist. So from the ages of like 16 to 26, I
Damn.
had no job. I was an artist. I traveled. I toured in Japan for like 2 months. I toured in India, scored a Bollywood film. Um,
What?
I got tracks with Raekwon and all these other crazy people. Anik and I actually have a song together, so that's actually how we met. And I got to live
No
that.
way.
Yeah, man. I don't talk about it now because it's so disparate from what I do. But
Yeah.
my hustle started as an independent record label when I was 16. That was the first business I ever started. And you know, having your music on iTunes while we were still in high school, and we were selling CDs and T-shirts hand to hand. Like I remember, you know, the first $1,000 I ever made was from selling my own CD, and so like I really come from this culture, and I think that I've been able to see it grow to where it is today, and it's incredible.
Dude, first, when we get off of this, we're gonna talk more about this, and I need to hear some of this.
It's pretty bad, but I'll let you in.
Nah, dude, I would love to hear what you were doing when you were 16, 17, and 18. And speaking of like the business and making your first $1,000 now, and we got a little brief introduction up to what you do, but let's dive deeper into what you're involved in, how you got there, and what aspects of those business do you see, where do you see it going in the future?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, my first business was an independent record label, and for 10 years I learned how to leverage the digital space to push direct to consumer products in a more informal way, but that's really what I was doing. Whether it was setting up a big cartel shop, you know, to learn
Yeah.
e-commerce back in 2008, you know, I was on it. Whether it was understanding how to leverage social media to find fans and data mine and build audience, whether it was learning the power of both video and photo and you know content and how that kind of drove conversion. These are the things that I spent, you know, so much time doing. The problem was it's very hard to monetize that at that time. And so,
Yeah.
you know, when I decided to kind of walk away from the music business at that time, I was really looking to like simply put, I had to get my money up. Like I was 26. I had been living a very like hand to mouth existence, you know, for the last 10 years. I didn't ever have a full-time job, didn't never committed to like, you know, anything that I did with my economics and finance degree, and I had to figure it out. And so the first business that my brother and I really kind of broke through with was a marketing and creative agency, and we focused on early stage startups and providing customer acquisition and strategy, digital strategy, to um, companies that were doing between like 0 and 20 million a year. And it's funny, I was essentially leveraging all the things I learned as a musician, as an independent record label owner, as a, you know, as a do it yourself type of marketer. I was doing those things at scale. The agency, you know, we did fairly well. It allowed us to really change our lives for the first time. Talking about, you know, taking your parents on vacation, having enough capital to start investing in other things like real estate, and you know, that eventually led us to starting the chai company, Kolkata Chai, that was incubated within the agency, that was funded, you know, with our own funds in the agency. And we basically took all the things that we would tell clients to do, like build community, you
Yeah.
know, go all in on social and do these things, and they didn't want to do them. We took those things and applied it to a brand that we built from the ground up. And today, you know, obviously we have a cafe in New York City. We have a really, you know, robust like digital presence and e-commerce business, and you know, have kicked it with everybody from Questlove to, you know, God knows who, but you know, it's become this like cultural phenomenon. So that's a big part of what I do now. And then tangential to that, kind of in the cultural space, I manage an artist named Anik Khan, Bengali American artist, super talented guy. You know, I think he's the one out of, you know, that entire crop of South Asian artists. And I've been working with Anik for a long time, and you know, to see him grow is like something I'm really proud of, to kind of see what he's been able to do. And lastly, I run a real estate investment fund company group, and essentially figuring out how do you reverse the cycle of, you know, as immigrants, there's just very little wealth creation for a lot of us, you know, and my parents didn't really figure it out. They figured out how to survive. They didn't figure out how to do anything else other than that. So for me, it
Yeah.
was big to kind of like break that up and say, okay, no, we're going to go on the offensive, and we're going to figure out how to really accumulate wealth and change this narrative that we're so used to.
Dude, a couple of things. Before we move forward, I want to talk. Yo, the chai is the best chai. I've said this many times, and I 100% stand by it. It's funny because still have so many bags in my cabinet, but every time I meet someone or I see, I mean, now it's very rare, but I'm always
Right.
like giving bags to people. I was like, yo, listen, you gotta, I make it for them. I make it for them myself, and they're like, yo, you gotta take this bag at home. You gotta go take this
You're
bag at home,
funny.
dude.
Amazing.
Because I
Now we,
love it. It was one of those things that at home it's different, but like when you're on your own, I was on the hunt for really good chai for a long time, and then when we had it with you guys, it was amazing. And then we moved down here, and
right.
then you guys started the e-commerce thing, and it like solved all my problems. Uh,
Now
it's
we're
just
thankful, man. Thank you.
nah, it's just one of those things that makes you feel like a little piece of home is in your home. It's like weird to explain, but I love that. The Anik Khan thing is so true too, because I think the first time you listen to his stuff, you do know that he's the one. Because there was a lot of people who were trying to do it, and people who were trying to like put on a front, but
Yeah.
he's the one.
Yeah.
It's all real, it's all authentic, and he's the one. The real estate thing, I would love to know a little bit more about. I understand like the mindset of what you had, but what made you pick real estate to go into? Because it is definitely one of those things that helps build generational wealth, and it is something like you said. Our parents weren't thinking about that when they got here. They were just trying to survive. So what? Because it is a very smart thing to do to go into real estate. But what kind of pushed you toward doing that?
To be honest, I had a very kind of harrowing life experience that pushed me to get to that point. Man, so 24 years old, I was like living this crazy life. I was on tour in India and Japan and doing all these things with music, and then at the same time, I was diagnosed with end-stage kidney failure. And so I had
Oh,
to completely put my life on pause. And more than pause, I had to go on dialysis at 24, which is a very,
damn.
very difficult thing to do. And it took me about a year of fighting. And eventually my dad was my kidney donor. And so I came out of that situation on my 25th birthday, having to start at zero, you know, all over again.
Yeah.
I had no money. I was living with my parents, literally just recovering. I had been living on my own for you know, since I was 18. Um, and when I came out of that situation, I just had a different focus and a sense of purpose than I did before. And I started to really understand that, you know, if it wasn't for my family, that entire situation would have gone very differently. You know, and I was so indebted, and uh, like the gratitude that I wanted to express to my parents was just like I couldn't find the words for it, right? And so a
Yeah.
big piece of what I started thinking about was how do I pay it back, right? How do I improve their life as they get older? What do I do to like make sure that this is not in vain? And the biggest thing to me was like I want to retire them. I want to take care of them. I want to make
Yeah.
sure they don't never have to think about money, because for the last 30 years in this country, that's all we've thought about, you know, and financial insecurity is a big piece of like my puzzle, and why I've decided to be an entrepreneur at a very young age is because I always wanted to control my means of income, you know, because I
Yeah.
just grew up seeing my dad be a victim to the job market and all these things. So real estate came out of a need for me thinking about how do I provide for my parents passively and over time and consistently. Um, like what type of investment vehicle would do that, right? What type of financial instrument would do that? And stocks and bonds don't really do that. You know, other things don't do that. But when you own real estate, you know, you incrementally build wealth over time, but you also get paid every month in terms of rent rolls and things like that. And I was like, that's a really interesting way to generate income for people that I love. And that turned, you know, from a seed of an idea when I was like 26, 27. 5 years later now, I have like 30 plus doors. I own about upwards of, you know, well into the seven figures of real estate in my portfolio. And it's been like this really interesting way to like give back to my family and make them feel like we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I got
That's
real serious real quick. Sorry about that.
yeah,
But
no, it's good. Nah,
that's a
it's
big
good to
part of my
hear.
story.
Yeah, no, that's a very important part of your life, and it seems like that kind of changed the way you were thinking. What you Because I was gonna ask at one point, like, oh, what made you kind of shift away from music completely? Because you did say like that's what you did for almost like 10 years. So this obviously makes a lot of sense of why you had to rethink what you were doing and how you were doing it. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Is What challenges do you think you faced in the start to try to build this? Because obviously, I'm sure it was not easy at all to get to where you are now. But what challenges do you think you faced? Even buying like your first thing, because coming from nothing, it is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the tactical challenges are endless. Understanding how to get a loan, where to find a lawyer, you know, what areas do you buy in? All of those tactical things are, you know, they're really tough to figure out. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But the toughest thing that I had to face kind of as I wanted to start this was just the fear and doubt that surrounded everybody that I was around. Like I remember
Yeah,
telling my dad, you know, I was like, I think I'm going to really dedicate uh, a lot of my time and effort to like building out a real estate portfolio. And he was like, no, don't do that. You have no idea what you're doing. It hit me and I was like, wait, what? I was like, no, you don't know what you're doing, right? Like you're scared of this,
yeah,
you're afraid of this, and you're projecting that on me. And I had been in the game long enough, right? Skateboarding, rapping,
yeah.
this, that. I had been in the game long enough to know the difference of when someone's projecting that fear onto you. And I was like, nah, I think I'm gonna do it this way. And you know, look, none of it's been easy. These last 6 years, I haven't slept, I haven't not worked a weekend, you know, all these things. But um, what we've been able to do financially, you know, what that what that is looking like today is like sometimes I don't even sit to realize what it is, but it was just getting over that initial fear and not letting someone who wasn't qualified to give me advice give that to me. You know, I hustled my ass off, man. I went to meetups. I went to, you know, I was on forums online. I was driving around neighborhoods that you should never be in. I was talking to people, you know, talking to contractors. I got my hands dirty for like 2 years, and then now things are really starting to come together.
Dude, that one you're making me question about what I'm doing, and I'd be like, oh, maybe I should rethink about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Stop it.
But the projection thing is interesting because it just reminded me of a story of my dad too. And I don't know why I don't know, there's a certain, I guess, our parents' generation that had these weird fears. Because I remember now when we were younger, my dad had an opportunity to get this house that we used to rent the basement in. And this is when
Hmm.
I was like 5 years old. And the woman was leaving the country and she's like, I will, you don't have to do a mortgage, just pay me. And my dad was so scared of this idea of owning this house because he heard story that like somebody slipped on snow in front of their property and he got sued. And he said no to it. And at
There
that
you
time,
go.
he was getting that house for like under $50,000, right? And it's probably God knows what that's worth now because it was in Queens Village, I think.
Oh
And
my
it's just
gosh.
interesting because as we
Yeah.
grew older, I can think about like times where they would project their fears, but like that's all they know. And I think that it's amazing that you broke out of that because I think a lot of people, and I don't know how many times it must have happened to me where I didn't break out of it because I just listened to what he said and thought that, oh, maybe he's right. Maybe I should be more fearful of whatever it is. But that's really
Yeah.
interesting. And I've
Yeah.
never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about this, but I think that's one thing for, you know, first generation kids of any background, you know, like that fear that our parents have is palpable and we can understand it, right? I mean, they picked up and they moved to another country.
Yeah.
As bold and as cool as we think we are today, we
Nah.
would never do that, right?
Yeah,
So,
hell no.
you know, I always tell my dad, like, I give you props, like, you know,
Yeah.
you're a thug, like you did something that would find very challenging. At the same time, discerning that difference is so key to be able to live a life that you want to live and not a life that somebody wants you to live,
Yeah.
you know. And honestly, it's lucrative too. I mean, like, if I had told my parents 5 years ago, hey, we're gonna own a cafe in New York City in 5 years, and you guys are gonna be able to walk up, they would be like, what? No, don't waste your money, right? Like, they wouldn't
Yeah.
know. The immediate reaction would be like, no, you're stupid, you don't know how to cook. And I'd be like, you're right, but that's not where the buck stops. So yeah, that whole fear equation to me is super important. And I think what I went through, at an early age, really flipped how fear works in my life.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I was I was going to talk about what you said about your parent. Dan, I've just lost my train of thought because I got so caught up in your story. I think this is like a very important lesson for a lot of kids to hear, and I think it's hard for sometimes because you think that, especially when you're younger, we are, especially even Desi people, like, are trained to think that our parents know what's best all the time, or they know what the right thing is. And in some cases that is true, especially parents that might have a lot more experience in whatever it is that you're dealing with. But there's a lot of times where they don't know. And like, it's something that it took me a long time to understand this too. Like, yo, they don't know. And it's not their fault. It's just that if they're the product of their experiences and we're a product of ours. And there will come a time where you will know more, or you will know what's better. And it's a
Right.
hard thing to do. And I still know some people that have a hard time dealing with that and breaking off from their parents, because we're bombarded with this idea that, yo, your parents know better for you and they know better than you. And I think that's an important lesson, to get to the point where sometimes you need to fight it, and sometimes you have to break past that. And it is a very interesting challenge, because it goes so deep down into who we are. But it is the right way to think about it. And I'm sorry for any parents who might ever listen to this and be like, screw this kid, or kid, to screw this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But I think that that's a very important lesson for a lot of people to learn. Um, where you are now, aside from given what's happened this past year, because that's just make things very complex, and hopefully this like a small bump in the road of where you're going, are you genuinely happy with the choices that you made? Are you satisfied with how far you've come from when you started?
100%. Um, I have no boss. I don't have any, people that hold money over my head. Every day I wake up and I get to decide, like, what do we want to do today? What do we want to create today? How do we want to shift culture today? How do we want to make people proud today? How do I want to stay true to myself today? And I've never woken up and be like, oh, I gotta go to work today. Shit. Sorry if I can't curse on here.
No, you
Apologies.
can. You can curse. You could say whatever you want.
Nah, like, I've never had that feeling of like, oh, I gotta go to work in the morning. And that is such a sublime feeling, like, to be, I'm 32, and to have that be the permeating thing that's been in my life for the past, X amount of years. Like, I'm spoiled. But on the other side of that, being an entrepreneur, being a founder, being a CEO, someone who has payroll, these things are very stressful. These things are very high stress, and it's not for everybody. So for every day that I feel like, wow, I feel amazing, there are nights where I feel like, yo, I don't know if I'm going to survive. I don't know if I'm going to make this.
Yeah.
I've had to sacrifice, a lot of things, like, romantic relationships in my life, time with family,
Yeah.
time with my friends. Like, I don't hang out a lot, right? Like, people ask me
Yeah.
like, yo, like, what are you doing tonight? Like, bro, I'm most likely working. Like, I'm most likely working because, you know, I have 8 people on payroll and there's a pandemic, or I have to, do XYZ campaign, and it's something I believe in. Like, I've had to make those choices. So, I want to give both sides of that coin for anybody who's kind of in that position of starting their own business or wanting to liberate themselves from, the 9 to 5 life. As beautiful as freedom is, it comes with caveats, and you got to make sure your mental game is as strong as your business game. And that's something that, I feel like I've been blessed with. I feel like God really looked out for me in that case. But it's not easy.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because there is like a lot of times people, even with not even like what you're doing, but even if people think of freelance work, because you're technically your own boss, people have this misconception that you all of a sudden have all this freedom, but it comes with a very high cost of, technically this means that you're always going to be working, or you should be working if you want to be successful. And you're
Yeah.
right, like your weekends are not your weekends, your nights are not your nights. That's one thing that people really need to understand, that when you have a job or 9 to 5, you clock in, you clock out, you go home, and then your time is your time. But when, especially if you're an entrepreneur and if you're building stuff, your time is not your time. Your time belongs to that thing until it becomes something, whenever, I don't know if we ever get satisfied, but you get to a point where you feel like you can take some time off. But like what you said, in the early years, like I'm sure you, it's been a very hard struggle. And I think sometimes it's also difficult. I talked about this in another episode. It's difficult for people around you to understand that you're trying to build something. And like, I remember when I was in med school, people forgive everything because they're like, yo, he's in med school, so he doesn't need to be anywhere. He doesn't need to have any obligations in any relationship. And sometimes that, not most of the time, that respect doesn't translate to other things that you're doing.
That's an incredible observation. Yeah.
And you notice that. I mean, I'm sure you struggle with that, where people think like, oh, you're the boss. You could take time out. You could come to do this thing. And I'm sure even your family's like, oh, just come here or do this. And it just doesn't work that way.
Nah, that's a really great observation. And it's so funny because I don't have any like medical school type of experience in my life
Yeah.
because I've been rogue, for so many years. So I never even think about it that way. But man, that's really real. And it's also funny how people will, yeah, I mean, people will be more excited that you got a job rather than you
Yeah.
started something, and
Yeah.
that's just, and that's okay. I'm not a cheerleader on like LLC Twitter telling everyone like, yo, start a business. Like,
Yeah.
I think my biggest thing is whatever you do, do it with pride. I remember, first couple months of the cafe opening, like I was taking the trash out. Like I was like scrubbing floors with my brother, after hours. And like I got 7 figures of real estate that I own. Why am I taking the
Yeah.
trash out? But that's what it takes. That's that having the understanding that you need to do all of that on this journey, I think is like really important.
Yeah, that's another great message to know, that you're right. No matter what you're doing, you probably will be involved in every level of it.
You should be, because if when you're involved with every level of your business, from taking the trash out to, pitching a VC, you understand what goes into each part of that, right? And
Yeah.
therefore when you hire, or when you have a partner, or when you bring people on, you can tell if they're doing a good job or not because you knew how to do it, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not this is a metaphor for certain things, but at the same time I think that's so valuable is once you've done it, you know how to teach it, and you know how to spot somebody else doing it well. And that
Yeah.
is key.
That is very important. Yeah, if you've never done it, it might be hard for you to. And you're right. I like the fact that you phrase it that you know when someone's doing it well, instead of phrasing it that you know when someone's doing something wrong. Because it's very easy for us to always point at things when it's wrong, but not always appreciate when it's being done well.
Yeah.
That's a great way to think. And that's why you're really good at what you do.
I don't know about all that, but I do know how to take the trash out at a cafe in case anyone needs somebody. I'm here.
do and this is probably like an obvious question too, but like, how do your parents feel about what you've accomplished and what you've done with you? Because I'm sure like they were probably skeptical even into your mid 20s, but how do they feel now?
Yeah, I think that's been the most validating piece of this entire journey, is the fact that my parents, on their first date in Kolkata, my mom spilled chai on my dad's lap because she was so nervous,
Yeah.
and now today they can drive to New York City, they can, go to the East Village and walk into a place that says Kolkata Chai that's owned by, their children. That's the biggest full circle moment, like that. It gets me emotional because that's the most important piece of this thing. It's being able to tell your story in an authentic way, to be a champion for, your family, your community, and to put a flag down, to let people know like, now we did it our way, against all odds. And I think, as crazy as my parents think we are, like they respect game, like they've come
Yeah.
around to understanding that, like, we're for real, and
Yeah.
I think it took them a very long time. I think, for first generation immigrant kid, like the moment that you win your parents over is when you can show them financially how well you're doing. You know, I
Yeah.
think when we were able to take my parents on vacation, kind of the early days of the agency, they were like, what are we doing? And it was like, no, we're doing this because, you know, we're able to do this. And I think when you're able to show and prove, there's nothing that they can tell you, you know, and then it's just being responsible with the money, you know, instead of buying XYZ, you know, we
Yeah.
reinvested that into different things that we believed in. And I think now, um, I know we made them proud, you know, and that's something that I hold so close to me every day.
It was such a sweet story. I didn't like obviously I had no idea about your parents. That's how they first met and that was like their first experience and now you guys have a chai spot in the city. That's so sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of
Did,
nuts.
did your brother have competition with your mom on the recipe?
It's funny because we shot like a mini documentary before we released before we opened the cafe,
Yeah.
and we talked about this moment, and then the next scene is in the kitchen is my mom like warring with my brother about the
Yeah.
recipe. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is my brother was not letting anybody tell him, you know, what to do when he put that chef's hat on. So, you know, we're at a point now where everyone really, you know, is on the same page with the recipe, and it's funny.
That's great. This is going to be a challenging question, I think, to ask a person like you who's involved in so many industries. But if you were to give someone advice, like either younger than you or someone who's thinking about pivoting and doing something and following in your footsteps, what kind of like what would you tell them? And it could be different for different industries if that
Yeah.
makes sense to answer it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll caveat and say that though I do a lot of different things, I think they're all united by the same thread. You know, this idea of like creating businesses and growing them that live at
Yeah.
this intersection of commerce and culture. So, you know, I'm a marketer, I'm a brand builder, and I'm an investor, and that kind of, you know, translates across different worlds.
Yeah.
My advice for people, if I had to reflect on kind of how I did it and the moments that made a difference, um, the first thing is like you have to know your material. It sounds so fundamental, but you have to be a sponge for knowledge and for the game and to soak every little bit of it up from, you know, books and magazines to documentaries to everything that exists to, you know, whatever exists in that world that you're trying to be successful in. You got to know what you're talking about because that meeting that you want or that moment that you want, you know, that will happen one day. And when that happens and you don't know how to shine in that, you're going to feel like, you know, you're going to lose an opportunity. So that's my biggest thing is like in this social media era, everyone wants to show, you know, everyone wants to prove like, hey, look at me,
Yeah.
I'm doing this. I think the real value is in learning and accumulating, you know, the knowledge almost like a weapon stash, you know, and
Yeah.
then when you're ready to step out, you know your game. And I think that's what separates, you know, the doers from the dreamers, so to speak. And the second thing I think would be around the fear element that we talked about. You know, it's like got to be really careful who you take advice from. You know,
Yeah.
in my life, what I do today is going to sound crazy, but I have been dreaming of this moment in this life in this existence since I was 16. You know, it took me 16 years of the most up and down life
Yeah.
possible, but this is exactly what I wanted to do. But how could I describe this to my parents in the 90s? It didn't exist, right? I mean, like the
Yeah.
internet barely existed. And so all the fear, all the things that were projected on me, I had to make sure that I was taking advice from qualified people. And if someone was not qualified and they were just, you know, telling me how they felt, I had to know the difference. And I think that's really important for people too. Of course, you should listen to people who are, you know, giving you advice and wanting the best for you. But at the same time, you got to make your own decisions if you want to live the life that, you know, you dream about. And it's very easy to say, but it's much harder to do and to live in passing.
That is incredibly good advice. And you're right. It is one of those things that it's probably very difficult to actually do, but it does make sense. And it's
Yeah.
very sweet advice too. It is it that I think that challenge, and it's funny because I've never thought about this until we had this conversation about, you know, your parents are going to give you advice in certain stages of your life, but you will come a point where you outgrow. Um, what you're trying to do versus what they're trying to tell you. And I think that's a very important moment to understand and take it in, respect it, but know that you need to either go somewhere else or you need to learn it on your own. It's
I think
hard.
I think you nailed it. I think the respect portion is key.
Yeah.
Like, throughout my life, as hardcore as I have been about what I want and how I want to do it, I've always been respectful,
Yeah.
because that's I think a key part of our culture, and also, it's just the right thing to do. And I think there is a way to be respectful, but also to be um, confident in your own abilities and, in your own path.
Yeah. Well, I I would hope that you be open to people reaching out. I know you're a very busy person, but if somebody wanted to reach out to you to either ask you something or want some advice or something, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, best way, man. Shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter or some social platform.
Yeah.
That's the best way, and even that can take a couple days before I get back. But email or DMs are the best. And if I don't get back to you, it's not personal. I'm just probably cutting through some crazy situation, and I always try to get back to everybody because I remember being in that position myself.
I'm sure no one's going to blame you if you take a little bit of time, especially after hearing all the stuff that you have to deal
You,
with and take care of.
you'd be surprised, man. People are like, "Hey, I need advice. Hey, give me advice." I'm like, "All right, bro. Like,
That
cut me a
entitlement is real. Just because you're on social media and you have a presence or you like to give advice or you're open to giving advice, I think sometimes people just feel entitled to it, and that's the
yeah."
wrong way to do it.
I give away a lot, to be fair. I give
Yeah, you
away a
do.
lot. I really treat my social media as a like ongoing educational platform. Like
Yeah.
I don't really flex. I don't really stunt. Y'all don't see any craziness from me. All I try to do is share what I'm going through and have people kind of learn from it. So I feel like I'm pretty generous on that side, and I want to continue to do that.
Dude, I think you're amazingly generous, and you do a really good job of balancing this idea of showing not flexing but kind of understanding like why they should be listening to you and why your advice is valuable, because it's obviously hard to just if you're just out here listening to people, but if they don't have anything to show for it, if they haven't done anything themselves, then why would you even listen? But I think you do a very good job of balancing both of those things.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
Comes
that's
comes
why
from
sorry go
Yeah. No, I was gonna say it comes from being in the trenches. You gotta if you're in the trenches, you know how to get out of them, and so that's the validation that I can provide for people.
Is there anything that you want to talk about or touch on or say that we haven't spoken about yet?
Um, wow. I think the only thing I'll touch on, because I'm going through this myself right now, and I think it's just an important piece of especially of like the South Asian and just immigrant first generation experience. We are trained to be good at skills and to learn and to be um, strong and focused. Rarely are we trained on how to be good to ourselves and how to like train our mind and how to like nurture ourselves throughout this whole
Yeah.
process. Entrepreneurship, business, all these things, these are, like I said, high stress. They're lonely. They are it feels like a pressure cooker all the time, like, and for everyone who wants to get into it or who dreams of that freedom, make sure that you're taking care of your mind before you're taking care of your money. And that's something that it's an ongoing process, but you got to really make sure that you're built for the long term and that you're not just doing something for a quick check or a quick buck, but that you have something you're passionate about, and you're taking care of yourself on your journey to getting it.
Dude, I really appreciate you saying that. And I think that more so now than ever before, that's a very, very important thing that people should hear and understand.
Yeah, I'm going through it, man. 2020 almost like broke me, and
Yeah.
to make it out on the other side, I learned a lot, and that's one of the biggest things I learned is like, hey, we gotta be kind to ourselves, and we gotta make sure that we're, pouring into ourselves the right way to be able to run this marathon that we're on.
Yeah. On a slightly lighter note, the last question that I have for you is
Let's do it.
what is your favorite pizza spot?
Wow. Oh man. In New York City, my favorite pizza spot has to be, man. I might have to go basic and say artichoke.
Really?
Yeah, is that basic? Am I like wild
Nah,
clown?
this is a question, personal question, man. There's no wrong answer. It's just whatever you like. No one should be able to tell you what you should or shouldn't like.
Well, man, this is funny because I barely get to eat. My days are so crazy, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy artichoke pizza. I'm not gonna lie about that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. What about you?
You this question comes up a lot, and it's a little bit more complicated. But I think for a regular basic slice, I think Joe's on Bedford and Williamsburg. I know they have it in the city too. They have a couple spots, but I think Joe's in Bedford is my like go to for just a plain regular New York slice.
That's solid. Yeah, there's one that what's the one on Sixth and like 19th or whatever the famous one. Roberta's. I don't know if that's the one. They have some incredible like New York slices, but
Yeah, I'm trying to think of 69. I'm not sure.
I yeah I should have prepped this question better, but man,
No.
um, internet, if you want to flame me for going to artichoke, I'll accept it.
Yo, listen, nobody should ever talk shit about what kind of pizza I always talk about it's, you love what you love. I can appreciate Domino's when the time is right and it's appropriate, and then I can appreciate something fancy too when it's appropriate.
That's
Um,
fair. Oh,
yeah.
you know what? I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna say Italy. Italy got some
Oh, yeah.
fire, some little pizza squares. Them joints be
Yeah.
banging. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
Italy is
add that in the
great.
mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Man,
That's still like super bougie and not New York
no,
like not super New
it
York centric, but
no, this is
I'm gonna
good,
let
man.
the internet come for me. It's all good.
No, I think it's great. I think it's perfect that that's what you like. Uh, man, I can't thank you enough for being on this and taking some time out to educate us and spit knowledge and sprinkle gems and do all that good stuff. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you for giving me the platform. Thank you for the thoughtfulness that went into this. That means a lot.
Of course, man. Thank you so much, and we will talk real soon.
Yes, sir.